Hello and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. I'm Dr. Richard Siegel, a certified sex therapist and supervisor.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
Also happens to be my awesome big brother.
Still
and
happens to be my favorite
cheers to
role.
you for that.
Cheers to you.
Cheers and cheers. Thank you for joining us for our end of 2021 show.
Indeed. Got a little, hopefully it was a little hair here.
Very nice strawberry sake.
Yeah, and the gory, the cloudy, that is actually kind of nice.
It's
sweet. It's sweet, but it's kind of smooth. So thank you for joining us. It's going to be our final show for the year.
Thought we'd take it outside for once and share a little Florida warmth.
Indeed, because
with those
we know
of you in cold climes.
Yeah, some of you are kind of bundled up right now.
Although I did leave Pittsburgh on Christmas Day in 60-degree weather.
Yeah.
Something very wrong about being 60 degrees on Christmas in Pittsburgh.
Indeed. So let's have one more toast to there's no global warming.
Yeah.
There we go.
Right.
I guess then Peoples was right.
So, Sex Talk is our weekly forum for talking all things sex and sexuality and sexual health.
Indeed. Something that we really should be talking about all the time.
Right.
However, this is our time to share this with you. Right? And again, I appreciate you joining us and those of you who have been with us throughout the year and even before then. Right? So we get to say goodbye to another year.
5 years we're doing this now? 6?
3.
No, we started on the radio in 2017, I think.
Was it really 2017 or 2018?
Yes, no. I think it was 2017.
All right. Well, we've been doing it long enough to where we have no idea how long we've been doing it.
That's right.
It's usually a line that you can cross.
And, if there's one theme that's emerged in these past 4 or 5 years, let's say, is that in our combined, let's say, over 60 years working in the field of sexology, clinical sexology, the study of all things sexual, that it's still a mess.
It is.
Our sexual health in this country is abysmal, and it seems like we're going from bad to worse as this bizarre year comes to a close.
Really, and that's the thing that does get me the most, and it can be so frustrating. It seems like after all of these years, how come things aren't getting better?
Well, we do. We ask that question a lot, and we kind of know what the answers are.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's like, why do marriages end? The usual suspects: money, politics, in-laws, kids, religion, right? Usual suspects when it comes to why, especially in the United States, especially in the country that prides itself better than anyone else on being number one, we're number one in way too many things.
Wrong
like
things.
Poor sexual health outcomes.
Indeed.
Usually so far ahead of even number 2 in whatever the list happens to be.
Yeah.
So, when sexual health is in a context of the same old ongoing moral arguments and religious battles and politics and red and blue and a continued lack of sexual knowledge, sexual literacy.
Right. Right, and unfortunately lack of. And as we have basically railed about many times over the last several years, but particularly in the last year, we don't talk about these things in schools, in homes, in any places where we can actually learn from them. So as a result, the number one source of education about sex and sexuality for most people is basically what you would refer to as porn.
Right.
And that's really, and again, I've pointed my finger in this camera many times over the last couple of years. And, again, that's a point that I'm still going to make without the pointing. So I'll make a pointless point that it's basically any of you who do cringe at that idea, who basically do not like the idea that the main sex educator for your kids is porn, you need to look into the mirror to find out why that is the case.
And ask what you're going to do about it.
Yeah.
Right? And even, a conversation about porn. Imagine that.
Right.
Instead of like everything else, the pretending, the acting as if, the denial, the stereotypical image of, although I heard they don't really do this, do they? Ostriches burying their head in the sand.
No, they really don't.
Right? But it's just such a great visual, right? Because as we've said before, if your head is buried in the sand, what part of your anatomy is most vulnerable for a good swift kick?
That's right.
And yeah, we get our asses kicked on the regular in this country as a result of our poor sexual health.
Yeah, and that's actually the main ass that gets kicked, is our sexual health.
And if you ask people what that means, most people would probably be stumped at first, but I would bet that the most predictable answers would relate to those kind of clinical sexual health issues, STDs,
Well, sure.
unintended pregnancy. But we know it's so much more, right? Because if we can really accept the premise, as we still, I think, fail to do, that sexuality is not what we do with our genitals, but what we are as human beings.
Right, what we do with our life.
And human beings are sexual creatures, and a comfort with that, and a way, the ways it affects our relationships, intimate relationships, family relationships, that again, a conversation between a parent and a kid about porn would go so far and accomplish so much in, like, say, 10 minutes. But I'd venture to guess that for 90+% of parents, the thought is, oh my God, I wouldn't talk to my kids about porn. Remember the late, great Greg Giraldo did that bit about how do you help your kids with their social studies homework on the same computer that you're looking at porn on when they go to sleep at night. Right? It's really it's part of the world we're living in.
It is.
And instead of addressing it like mature adults, let's just blame it for all our problems.
Right. Because it's easy. It's a good excuse. It's a good out. It's a great way to deflect any personal responsibility that you may have as a parent. Your kids are not victims of society. They're not victims of media presentations. And I think it's, I want to just repeat one thing and then we'll kind of move on. Something that you brought up again, I think last week, that we've talked about before. Parents really are clueless about what their kids are doing and seeing online.
Right.
Absolutely clueless.
Right.
So just use this as a litmus test. If you think as a parent, you feel comfortable knowing what your kids are doing online, tell yourself you don't. Right? Because the more comfortable you are thinking that, the more deluded you actually are in real life.
It could very likely be the case. Yeah. And those conversations, I just can't accept that any conversation can be more difficult than the alternative. Right? Than ignorance and consequences that happen needlessly because of this crazy fear.
Exactly.
Thinking, we put ideas in their heads, or we give them permission.
No, the ideas are already there, and they don't want your permission.
Right. What they want is guidance and advice, and just like, in an ideal world, it would be no less important or comfortable than a conversation about safety in any other
Right.
form. Stranger danger, looking at traffic when you cross the street.
Wearing your
right?
seatbelt.
You know, being
Exactly.
safe.
Exactly. So if we look at, kind of put a short little list of some of the 5 probably more significant sexual issues that we've been dealing with in the past year, there is also that same common theme. I think that underlies a lot
You mean,
of those.
well, you want to start with the observational one or the kind of like main news items of the year?
Well, I think in terms of what have become,
Like behavioral things.
Well, I want to start more with the general issues that have been the main issues, and then kind of look at, because obviously we can't finish 2021 without talking about the impact that COVID has had and continues to have.
Right.
All right. So I first want to take a look at these, the main headlines for 2021. Right? Some of the top sexual headlines. Again, because I think it shows where we're at with a lot of this stuff.
Of course.
First
Part of our
and
job
foremost,
is sex in the news.
Exactly. So first and foremost, some of the most important issues that came up in 2021 really have to do with both the present and future of both women's autonomy and reproductive rights, which also means reproductive health. If reproductive rights are in jeopardy, reproductive health for
Absolutely.
everybody is in jeopardy.
For everyone, right? It is high time that we get past this ridiculous idea that preventing unintended pregnancy is a women's health issue.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It takes 2 to tango, and clearly just because men don't get pregnant doesn't absolve men of at least half of the responsibility of making a baby or preventing
That's right.
making a baby.
Exactly. And there are legal issues that are, surround that, but very few judges will do anything to enforce those.
Right.
All the pressure is put on women. And I mean, to me, this is one of the biggest throwbacks back into history, because it is once again putting women into a situation where society has to have some kind of debate to determine whether or not they're human beings and they should be able to have a say in what they do with and to their bodies.
Right. And if that sounds too ridiculous, it isn't, because the
that's exactly
alternative
what the issue
is you're a human being with your own rights to choose the fate, destiny of your life and your body, or you're an incubator. And the way things have been moving, the number one issue on our list has been the nonsense that's been going on, started, not surprisingly, by Texas and spreading like an STD all over the country.
Exactly.
There's a new spate of abortion laws that will risk the very foundation of safe, legal access to women who should be able to choose when and whether they will have a child, period.
Right. And, and
thanks to the period for making that possible.
It's amazing. One of the very first things that I started talking about when I started in this field, I find myself having to kind of dust off and unroll that poster and fly it again. Because one of the very first lessons, and I was hired under a grant as the first male sexuality educator for Planned Parenthood in the state of Florida. And there was part of an initiative, right? Remember the grant funding to encourage more male responsibility.
Right.
And one of the things I've always said to people who do oppose abortion, right? And I can respect your right to have an opinion, but please don't think just because you have an opinion that it is some kind of grand ultimate truth. It's just your opinion. Right? Now, by the same token, we can say that about pro-choice. Right? So one of the things that we have to revisit, right, is this idea that I don't care how anti-choice you are, I don't care how strongly somebody feels against a woman having an abortion.
Right.
Making it illegal has never, ever done anything about abortion except make it more dangerous
Right.
and put more women's life at risk.
Right.
That's all it will do. Right? So if you are very opposed to abortion, then I would say you are probably somebody who kind of throws words like morals and ethics around like you really mean them. So why don't you find somebody who is pro-choice and partner with them so that together we can work on making abortion less necessary. But
Right.
until then, remaining legal is the only thing that will keep it safe.
Right.
So if you have a problem with it, don't try to outlaw it because that just makes everybody at risk. Let's
Yeah.
work together to make it less necessary.
Classic point.
Yep.
That it's another one of those things that's so frustrating that the vast majority of people who are so adamantly opposed to abortion also oppose birth control,
Right.
which is the number one way to prevent an unintended
exactly right.
pregnancy. Birth control and sexuality education prevent far more abortions than billboards on the turnpike of talking fetuses quoting Bible scripture.
Right.
Right? Or
it just doesn't work.
Trucks driving around with pictures of dismembered fetuses.
Right. None of which, by the way, are accurate.
Right. And they don't, right? Yeah,
So-
everybody should be behind birth control if we don't want abortion,
Exactly.
because that's right. That's
Right.
the issue.
So we can prevent unintended pregnancies. Let's. Right? And let's also accept that there's a reality that pregnancies are unwanted. Let's accept the reality that children are unwanted by many, many people. All of you who think that the ultimate answer to abortion is adoption, just put them up for
Yeah.
adoption.
Yeah.
Well, A, you are cruel. Forcing women to go through one of the most dangerous things a human body can go through, and then just give it away. Like, that's an easy, casual thing for women to do. Second of all, where are you in all of this? How many kids have you adopted? Why do we have tens of thousands of children that have been languishing in foster care for decades?
Yeah.
Right? So, let's stop with the nonsense rhetoric and finally deal with these issues in an intelligent, rational, and effective way.
Right.
All right? Let's move on to our second one.
Okay. Visa and MasterCard stops processing fees for Pornhub
Yes.
and eBay and Twitch and Apple Pay.
Well, they're all also, again, that one is how now all of these banking institutions are trying to impose their moral will on society.
Right.
And basically now refusing to process transaction for adult erotic material, sex toys. Go on eBay and I think even Amazon, that they won't even let you pay for some of these things through PayPal.
Because
Because eBay owns PayPal, right? So, you have Twitch, Apple
crazy.
Pay, eBay, AVN, which is basically the Adult Video Network. This is a network, this is a company that is about making porn. But what they've now just done is stopped allowing people to monetize what they post. Right?
But what about the OnlyFans thing, where it
Same
lasted,
thing.
lasted all of 15 minutes before they realized they were going to lose their business model.
And they
so
did.
They said, never mind, you can go ahead and put the adult content up. So
Well, when you look at Instagram and you look at some of these other platforms, they're drawing lines, and these lines are very arbitrary.
Completely. Well, when we started putting this show up on Facebook, how many times did we have to appeal Facebook attempting to block us and call us porn?
Yep.
Two middle-aged Jews sitting around talking, that was porn to them.
So.
If anybody is, wow,
Right.
we know some good therapists.
Let's go to number 5. I think I want to follow that up because that second one with these banking institutions not processing any purchases on these platforms because of sex and porn is related to all of this FOSTA, SESTA nonsense.
Right. One of the first things from the Orangutan in Chief's administration was passing these dual bills. Always, always the same premise. It's always about protecting the children. Right. And these, I don't remember the acronyms, but they're about
Fighting Online Sex Trafficking Act.
And
the SESTA. Oh, I just blanked on it.
Yeah,
but it's also it's also about online sex and trafficking.
Right.
So
it's reminiscent of the old, like what we used to call Comstock laws, right?
Yes.
Anthony Comstock, who our first drug czar and morality police and anti-pornography and prostitution zealot, prided himself on harassing bordello owners to suicide, and it's still harkens back to those days that sex work is vice and threatens children.
And it's also based on the incorrect premise that any woman, and we're talking primarily females, right? Biological and trans, but those are mostly who sex workers are. And it's based on this ridiculous notion that anybody that does sex work has to be coerced into it. They can't be doing it voluntarily. They're coerced into it. They're being abused. It's not something anybody would do on their own. And surprise, surprise, FOSTA and SESTA have not done anything to make sex trafficking better. If anything, it has increased sex trafficking.
Just rewind a little bit to what we said about making something illegal doesn't make it go away.
That's right. It's actually just shut down a lot of these people that were online and were in control. Village Voice Personals, which was always about dating and hooking up. Backpage. First one that got shut down was Craigslist, right? Because again, there was a quote study, and I'll never forget this, where these two women who, again, they are this organization that they started to fight sex trafficking. And basically what they did over their glasses of wine, sitting down at the computer, the two of these women who have no training, no background in anything, basically looking at images and ads on Craigslist and deciding among themselves, oh, she looks young, she must be under 18. Oh, she's young, she's under 18. And they presented that to Congress, who, of course, again, if it says what you want them to say, right, that old Marty Klein thing, right, if Ted Bundy said that he had murdered and sexually violated all of these women because he was watching reruns of The Cosby Show, we would have basically attributed that to the ravings of a lunatic.
Right.
But because he said he did it because he watched porn, we took those words as carefully thought out social scientist type of stuff. So it's the same kind of thing. If these women are presenting, well, we saw these and these are girls that are underage and they're obviously being trafficked, they just ran with it. Right? Yeah. Again, not to say that girls are not being trafficked, but that's not what these laws are actually based on. And here's another beautiful irony, that these laws are such an abysmal failure that they now have passed another law called the Safe Sex Workers Study Act. So we now, we passed a law to prevent online sex and people from actually controlling their own sex work, and screwed it up so abysmally that Congress now had to pass another law so that they can examine the damage they did with their first law.
Wow.
This
Only
can't
in
make this
America. And, meanwhile, of course, where there are real crimes happening and real battles to be fought, we continue to ignore. And sadly, 2021 is on the books as the deadliest year on record
Yeah.
for trans people, according to the Human Rights Watch.
That's right. And apparently we broke that record in very early November. So we're going to add a few on before this is even being seen.
Yeah.
So yes, 2021 was a record-breaking year.
Yeah, really good year for running after made-up imaginary crimes
Yeah.
like voter fraud
Right.
and children being trafficked online and ignored basic human rights to live.
Exactly.
Isn't that a rosy?
Well, that's
picture?
becoming our American value. We're going to have to work this into the Pledge of Allegiance somehow at some point, that we only like you if you act and speak in a way that we like.
Yeah,
Then we don't want you to exist.
and I guess some legal good news, right, in terms of high-profile court cases.
Yeah.
Epstein's partner in crime, what's her name?
Ghislaine
Maxwell,
Yeah.
was indicted and found guilty of participating. Now that was legitimate trafficking and exploitation of minors.
And grooming.
Right,
And,
a
yeah,
woman
all of that.
grooming young girls for old rich guys to rape
Yep.
at their little getaway parties. I'm glad that in that case, both of them, justice was served,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whether the conspiracy theorists are right about what actually happened to Epstein, it's hard to argue that he didn't get his due, right?
Yeah.
There was some
Right.
justice. And that a woman would participate. It's hard to say who was the more evil piece of shit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully she will be in jail for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
at
that's
least
it.
there's one court case with some good justice.
Indeed. And of course, we can't finish out a talk about 2021 without acknowledging that we've still been living with COVID. And it's
A lot of people seem to be acting like we're not.
Yep.
Oh, it's really crazy.
It really defies explanation.
I heard a stat repeated this morning that right now someone is being infected every 3 seconds in the United States.
What are we? We're back up to 265, 270,000 cases a day in this country. And of course, New Year's Eve, let's all get together. Right? Let's all get really close and cough on each other.
People are going to learn the
breathe
Greek
on each other
alphabet
and-
soon,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So
So Omicron is probably
Indeed.
a new word for most people.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, folks, we're still in a pandemic, and it's still, whether it is as deadly as the Delta variant is irrelevant. If the
It really
spread
is.
is continuing, and it's still contributing to long COVID,
Yep.
where people are having symptoms
Yep.
seemingly for the rest of their lives after the COVID infection clears
That's
or
right.
doesn't clear.
And we're still kind of very new with a lot of this stuff. Personally, I do think we're going to get and need to get to that point where we accept it as endemic. But part of that is also having a different relationship with this virus, understanding it a little bit better. Nobody, freaks out when you say the flu or pneumonia, but we freak out when we hear COVID. So it's still new enough that, and we don't understand it enough, where we still see this major impact on people's psyche, particularly their sexual psyche. Right? And how it's affecting relationships, and it's how it's affecting people in general, particularly sex.
But this is, in our lifetimes, has there ever been a disease that's been so politicized and
Yes.
yeah,
In a
like
different
this?
way, but something like
and
HIV.
AIDS, of course,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, which
right.
was more political than it ever was medical.
That's true, and you know, we got that kick in the ass because for all those 20-something years of all the people saying I'm not A, B, C, D, or E, so I don't have to worry about this.
Right.
Now, heterosexual people who are not men having sex with men, have hemophilia, have had blood transfusions, or come from Haiti, are the most typical demographic for people contracting HIV
That's right.
today. And
That's right.
globally, it's always been
Yeah.
the same heterosexually transmitted STD as gonorrhea and syphilis
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything else.
I mean, even here
Again,
in this country.
just America.
Right. But even here in this country, the only thing that we were really different about was our surveillance. We
Yeah,
only
right,
wanted,
right, right.
once it was identified in these groups of people that we didn't want, and those 4 groups of people that you just mentioned, right? Excuse me, okay, sorry, bug crawling up your leaf there. Basically was referred to, remember, in the late 80s as the 4 H's.
Right.
Right? And again, this was the politics of the time. So
This was public health, right?
Right.
This was medical circles.
there you
right?
go, right? And again, I made shirts. I was saying it so often, right? Public health is not a personal choice,
Right.
right? So this idea of getting vaccinated, wearing masks,
Wearing
social
a fucking
distance,
mask, people. Why
This
is
is
it
not
still,
political,
no,
and it's not a personal
We're
choice.
coming up on 2 years,
Right.
and it's still
Mm-hmm.
like people are being asked the most invasive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So 2 years later, almost 2.5 years later, we're
Well, no, March will be 2 years.
March will be 2 years. That's right.
Right.
So when did we shut everything down? I guess that
March
was in
of 2020.
Right.
Mhm.
So going on 2 years. So what is the impact that COVID has had on people's sex lives? Well,
It was funny.
Couple of things.
The first thing we thought, and I'm sure we were not the only ones, when they started talking about quarantining, was, everybody's going to be home watching TV, getting drunk, and having lots of sex.
mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, the
It did
exact
not.
opposite. Everybody was great with the TV and the eating,
Yeah.
but apparently frequency of sex went down overall.
Mhm.
Right.
For both single and partnered people.
Right.
Right? More so with single people, right? But partnered people, and this also relates to this other idea. We expect that they're going to be this sex boom. People are going to be sitting at home, right, just getting drunk or doing whatever, and just having sex all the time.
Yeah. No.
And that was related to another prediction that was made that there will be a baby
right.
boom after that. But one of the things that people forgot to factor into that equation is, all right, let's look at all of these married couples, and maybe not so married, but they're couples, and now they have to quarantine. They're going to be locked in together. What about all those that have kids?
Mm-hmm.
Kids can't go anywhere, right? That put a
Yes.
real damper on it. The fact that there's different COVID information. See, something I wish Americans were, I think, a little bit more sophisticated in terms of being an intellectual
Americans
people.
sophisticated?
Because one thing that people just have a very difficult time understanding is that issues are different in different places.
Right.
That there are community issues over here related to COVID that may be different than the community issues over here. We just want to hear the one easy bit of rhetoric and just, one size fits all.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way. So because there was different messaging, I think, coming from different places, as well as all of the hype, and of course, it's all you hear when you turn on a TV or a radio or a computer. So this stress, this anxiety, there's just this. I mean, there's got to be in the DSM-6. There's got to be some kind of pandemic anxiety that becomes a diagnosis.
There has to be, truly. And I think it's also been part of this denial that we're seeing people running around like nothing's going on. right? That
Yeah.
even a year and a half ago, we were describing it as a slow motion tsunami, where there is a collective mental illness. I think it's safe
Yeah.
to say that we're all sharing
Yeah.
this kind of slow, ongoing adjustment with anxiety and depressive features, right? And we have to acknowledge it more. I'm glad that mental health, that's one of the silver linings of this, is that there's been a lot more discussion, a lot more public information campaigns, a lot more TV commercials. I like this new campaign, guy at the gym, you know, with tons of weight stuck on his chest, and the guy goes, "Oh, you need help? You need help?" He's like, "No, I'm fine. There's no shame in asking for help." He goes, "Oh, you don't know my family." And it's like,
I don't think I've seen that one.
it's on point,
Nice.
right? And we have to acknowledge that this is difficult. It's evidenced by the insanity of you know, the behavior problems.
Right.
Whether it's people carrying on airplanes. Whoever in a lifetime has ever imagined seeing the stuff that's now routine?
It really is.
Right?
It's so unbelievably common.
Now it's like, I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out.
Yep.
Right now people get on a plane, wonder how many incidents will I witness today. It's just it's
and you know,
stress.
extend that out. Right? Another thing that has been impacted by COVID, partly because people have been shut in and isolated, and a lot of social support systems have been cut off. It's not just on airplanes, but even in home. When we look at domestic violence, intimate partner abuse, child abuse, all of these things have increased significantly over the past year.
At least we haven't heard about it so much. So hopefully that means things leveled out a little. But remember at the beginning, when it was so bad, like in New York City, they had to have set up secret programs like numbers where women could call and say, "Oh, I just have to run out to the Duane Reade and meet a domestic violence caseworker in the pharmacy,"
Right.
because they were, you know, when you're quarantined with your abuser,
Yep.
you can't just call
right.
and, you know, you can get beaten with the phone. So yeah, hopefully things have settled down. There is some good news. Some of the researchers are showing that the pandemic has contributed to couples communicating more or attempting to.
Yeah, now
therapists.
a little piece of context for that.
Yeah,
Right? When we
yeah.
started out talking about people having less sex, that's basically been reported for about half of all people in this country that were surveyed. And we're talking about thousands and thousands of people that have been surveyed at this point.
Right.
About half of them report that. But almost half of them are also reporting some positive impacts.
Yeah, a lot more creativity in the bedroom. I know from the many therapists I supervise to become sex therapists that people are, there's definitely an increased call for information on kink and toys and fun with lube and the very, very many different things that opening up a relationship might mean for particular.
And even that idea, right? Terms like consensual non-monogamy and BDSM were among the most searched terms.
Yeah.
Now, what I find interesting is that consensual non-monogamy was a very, very widely searched term, especially among men, and BDSM was a particularly searched word among women.
Since I'd say that's the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, there's a word that's come out of a lot of this stuff as well, sexploration. That a lot of this pandemic stuff has helped couples, in some cases forced couples, to talk a little bit more about this stuff. Right? Can't run away from it anymore. But it's also been prompting people to talk about trying new things and sharing more fantasies with each other. So there really is an erotic aspect. There's kind of a new erotic script, if you will, that's that was being written over the last year and a half, 2 years. that hopefully we will see carrying into the future.
Let's hope that New Zealand sets the trend for the rest of the world, right? Did you see in the news the Prime Minister of New Zealand publicly responded to a reporter's question that now they've set up these safe zones, and in the safe zones for vaccinated people, the groups of up to 25 people does include Tinder dates.
Nice.
So
now there are
people should
still
wear
gonna be
masks.
people.
If you're going to an orgy, be safe.
That's
Wear
right.
condoms and masks.
Condoms and masks.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And hand sanitizer.
And this is probably would have been continuing a trend despite COVID, but of course, just given a push by COVID, there's been an observed increase in online dating.
Right. Now, there is a slight change in that, though, as well. Because, remember, online dating for most people was kind of like home shopping network.
Yeah.
Right? It was really, I want one of those, I want one of those, I want one of those. So it was basically, okay, I whichever direction you swipe, I guess right. I guess swipe right if you like them. But it's like, okay, I like you, I'll talk to you briefly, and then we'll hook up. But there is a qualitative change in online dating, especially, and this is what really kind of impressed me, especially among young people, where it's really more about wanting to find a connection, a real relationship, not just a hookup. They're having
thought you were
more.
going to go the opposite.
No, they're actually having
at
more
the same
meaningful
time-
and longer conversations online.
But I'm also seeing a big push, like some of the big companies like eHarmony and Match.com, for folks our age.
Yes.
Right? And it's like,
Yes.
forget the 22-year-old hookup apps, date like a grown-up kind of message.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, we're seeing that across all ages. Right?
Good.
And again, normally,
Good.
before COVID, I would say that there was kind of a generational split where older people would be using online dating to want to create that connection, and more old style type of dating, and younger people were really more into the hookup.
Right.
But now we're seeing across the board, even among younger people,
Good.
which does also relate to other polls that have shown that younger people, Gen Zs and millennials, are talking about finding someone, a life partner, talking about marriage more than they have in the last couple of years.
Well, yeah, it would be nice to have someone to live in mom and dad's basement with.
That's right.
So we're losing
right.
our son and running a little
right.
long, so let's
The sun
wrap
is setting
this up.
on 2021.
Right? For Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers, anyway. So we'll just end by thanking you again and asking you to please help us out by subscribing to our YouTube channel. And if you came to us through Facebook, likes and shares would be greatly appreciated.
Indeed.
And we wish you the best for a happy, healthy, safe, sexy 2022.
Yes, and like we said last year, let's hope 22 is better than 21. Right? But rather than hope for it, let's make it happen. So stay safe. Have a great New Year's.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.